Hey everybody, how's it going? I'm Eric,
And I'm Ty.
and we are ShantottoCast here, and we have a very prime opportunity to
Yeah.
present some new information to you today. Priming, well, today is in the day of recording, of course.
Yeah.
Priming was revealed. We got a new mechanic in the game.
Woohoo. Yeah, it's interesting. We did. There's been some speculation on it because the Clive got revealed a while ago from memory, but now we have an actual confirmation of what it was. Yeah, I'm excited about it. Like
Yeah,
it looks interesting. I'm excited to talk about it too.
it's super cool. I mean, the card we got, like the first one, looks awesome, and if everything else is just as good, then yeah, we're in for a very interesting shift in the meta, I
Yeah.
think. So, Ty, why don't let's go over what these two new cards are and what they do. Would you like to take Ifrit or Clive?
I'll take it for it.
All right, so then I'll take Clive, and
Oh,
I'll
you meant
open
like
up.
talk about them.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah. I can do that.
yeah.
Yeah.
And since we start with Clive with priming, I guess we'll start with that one.
Yep.
So Clive is a four drop fire forward card name Clive, job dominant, category FF16.
Woo.
He's got 8,000 power. He has haste. He has the text, the job icon forwards and job dominant forwards other than Clive that you control gain 1,000 power. When Clive deals damage to your opponent, discard your hand, draw 2 cards, and then priming, in quotation marks, Ifrit, category 16, pay 1 fire and 1 other color CP.
Yeah, one
So the anthem is pretty neat. 4K haster with 8,000 power. That's pretty on curve. It's pretty healthy. But dealing damage to your opponent and then Pokemon effect. I forget what card. Like which professor does that. But I know actually I think multiple
Oh,
professors do that. Where it's like discard your
uh,
hand and then draw X
it was the.
cards.
You're thinking of Professor's Research. Though Professor's
Yes.
Research is discard draw 7.
Thank you. Yeah, it's close to that because
Yeah.
you know, depending on how far you in with the aggro, yeah, you might be doing that. This isn't
Yeah.
necessarily a pure aggro card, but it is certainly a beautiful card with a lot of good text and a
Yeah.
nice signature on it. So this is the signature card for Opus 24 coming up soon.
Yeah. That will pull. Wink, wink.
Oh, absolutely, dude. Hey, look, Leo hooks us up with a beautiful master case every time. He's
Yeah.
been 3 in a row.
3 for 3. Yeah, yeah. I even whenever I send him our payment or whenever I send him my payment, I always add the note like if we don't get the signed, like I expect a refund every single time for the last 3 times exactly.
That's funny.
Well,
Well, so it turns out threats and extortion work.
yeah, clearly.
I just statistically shown.
But yeah, all right. So let's move over to Ifrit. Ifrit parentheses XVI. Ifrit 16 is a 7-drop 10k forward. Job icon category 16 with haste. When Ifrit 16 enters the field, deals damage to your opponent, or when Clive primes into Ifrit Final Fantasy 16, choose 1 forward the opponent controls, deal it 10,000 damage. Spitflare S, choose 1 forward, deal it 10,000 damage. Yeah,
So,
it just 10k, just whack it.
yep, that's super solid.
It
One thing I will
it kind of
note,
reminds me in a way of Braska.
yeah, 100%.
Same cost, same power, same amount of damage. It can be prevented technically. We gotta
Yeah.
point that out.
Right.
But also just the haste is really nice.
Yeah. Well, I mean, on a 7-drop, I'm not terribly surprised. That high
Yeah.
of a cost on a forward, you'd expect a keyword probably.
If it costs 7, it better impact the game.
Right. Like
You know.
that's what I'm feeling about it.
Yeah. So at least on its surface, when it enters, kill something, which is already nice.
Mm-hmm.
And then when when it lands, which is I think a key distinction between this and Braska, when it hits, deal 10k to something. So you get to kind of punish your opponent for keeping only one up and one down, where ETB, kill the thing that's up, swing for damage, hit the damage, deal the next one, or kill the other one. You do 1 point of damage and you remove 2 forwards. That's really good, just playing him alone. And then also just the special deal 10k is really good. I mean, pay 2, deal 10k to something is really nice. Fire doesn't have the most recursion, so it's not like you're going to be like constantly cycling this.
I mean, so I will say to that it is smart of them to make Ifrit 16 the distinction.
Yes.
Because then, Fire does have a lot of summon recursion with card name Ifrit. And so you could just use any number of Terra EXs to just nab your stuff back. And then you just special forever, and it would just get really nasty. So I think it's pretty wise of them to think a little ahead and be like, we're gonna give this one a unique moniker so that special is very distinct. However, there is another card you can discard for the special on this, but that is related to the next part of this discussion. Do you want to move on, or is there anything else you want to say?
Well, the one thing I want to say to lead into the next one is Ifrit seems really good. He seems like a really good card. 7 is a lot to pay for that.
It is,
that's
but luckily
still a fair amount.
Luckily, you don't have to pay that 7.
Yes. So, priming. So I think there's going to be here 1 sec. I just realized they actually linked to supplementary rules with the PDF that I completely ignored. So I'm gonna open that up so I can take a peek at it. But should we just read from this, since this is straight from the mouth?
I was just gonna describe it. I don't think we need all the exact specific technical jargon as long as we get the point across, right?
Yeah, fair enough.
So, all right, how are we gonna do? You want to describe priming? Should I? I mean, either way is fine by me.
I'll get in. I have it I have the slideshow right in front of me, so I'll be able to, at the very least, the intro. So basically, so priming is on cards, at least from right now, seems to only be on cards dominant. That's kind of what they're implying.
Thematic for 16.
Yeah. So when you have a forward that has priming on it, at sorcery speed, when the stack is completely empty, at literally the only time that you can. So you can only do this during your turn. You can only do it during the main phase, really. You may pay the priming cost and search your deck for the card that it lists, in this case Ifrit 16, put it on top of Clive, and then, if I'm understanding this correctly, that the new card will be named Clive and Ifrit 16.
Yes, it overrides the existing card.
Yes, it overrides the existing card, but you keep the text on it.
Well,
sans priming.
You keep, well, not all the text. You keep the abilities of the card that was overlaid. You do not keep any of the abilities from the card beneath. However, you do keep keywords. You also keep damage that was applied, or damage or power reduction.
Yeah.
So that's something that's worth noting there.
Yeah. Well, I am curious. So, because the way that I initially read it was when Ifrit swings, right? So let's say I have Clive. I prime him into Ifrit. Ifrit primes, deal 10k to something. I get rid of their only attacker. I swing. Ifrit lands. I get to deal another 10k. I thought you also got the discard as well, but it could be.
We'll have to double check. I know there was a lot of discussion in chat earlier. It was actually moving a little too fast for me to fully keep up, between work and everything else. But from what I understand...
Wait, one sec. They have a line in here in the PDF. Information other than the card name, such as cost, job, card text, and power, will only be that of the card job icon that is on top. So you are right. You're right. So he does lose that. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. That's a little bit more fair, I think.
Yeah. I mean, on on hit, deal 10k to something, discard your hand, draw 2 is
That'd be really,
little,
really strong.
a little good. Yeah.
Yeah. But something else to note is that Clive also counts for that special when they are primed.
Yeah.
So when these cards are primed together, Clive can be discarded because, the card counts as both names. However, something else to keep aware of is that if both cards are on the field separate of each other, you cannot prime because you would be putting another copy of the same card on the field at the same time. And that breaks the legend rule or the mono name rule. And it's also worth noting that when you prime, that does not count as an enter effect. That is counted as priming. So, it doesn't create a stack. Effects that trigger because of Ifrit, being primed, that'll create a stack separately. But priming itself, the ability of priming does not create a stack. So your opponent cannot respond to it. Which is why it's interesting that you can only do it on your own turn. And that's actually a good thing, because I think being able to do that on your opponent's turn would be a little too strong.
Yeah, especially with a card like Ifrit, to be able to pay for... Like, let's say... someone mentioned the scenario in chat where you basically dump your entire hand, turn 1, you play Clive, you swing, you draw 2. You immediately have that that fuel to prime him. Assuming you draw a fire card, right?
Right.
So... if you were able to, if the opponent was actually like, oh, okay, in that case, like, play these 2 forwards, and you get to be like, all right, I'm going to ping that for 10k, that would be bonkers.
That would be wild. Yeah, that just would be too good. That'd be just sick. Although, one thing I have some curiosity toward is if you prime Ifrit, does it retain the dull/active status of the card underneath, or...
Well, I'm very happy to inform you. Yes, it does.
Okay, cool. Gotcha.
That's the third slide of the PDF. So like a dull card becoming prime will stay dull. A primed card can't attack unless it has haste. And then if, let's say I gave Clive, like, the example used here is off the Monk, the 3k in Brave. If I gave Clive 3k in Brave, then primed him, Ifrit will also have 3k in Brave.
That makes sense. Yeah, like that's kind of part of, like I said earlier, with retaining stats and stuff like that. So that's cool. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I missed. I believe there is.
If a primed card is removed from the field, or
Yes.
let's say sent to the break zone in this case, the card on top gets sent to the graveyard or sent to the break zone and then removed from the game. The card under it just gets put into the break zone.
Yeah, the dominant, basically. Let's assume that dominants are the only ones that are going to be priming. Which makes sense.
So Clive will go to the break zone, but Ifrit will be removed from the game.
Yeah. So, actually, one thing I do want to also mention here is that this. So we talked about this in chat. This actually priming gets around Sid Randell and a few other cards that check with auto abilities. Because this, again, if you prime, it does not count as entering the field. It is primed. There's an ability there that was used. It's not. You're not paying to cast a card that is entering. You are not. It is not entering the field by anything other than an effect, rather than a trigger. So there's a whole bunch of technicalities there to remember, but this should get around Sid Randell. I don't see why it wouldn't, which is super cool. They can still Ami, the triggered effect that goes on the stack after, because, if it does say when it is primed, enters the field or whatever, you're good. You can, that triggered effect goes on the stack. So, yeah. There was one other thing in chat, though, that who mentioned it? It might have been... Who was it? Doesn't matter who it was. But somebody said that there might be a window on your opponent's turn to prime if your opponent has given you priority for whatever reason. Does the slideshow
I
say
don't
anything
believe
there?
that's true. Let's see. Priming effects cannot be placed on the stack. Let's see. Information. Blah blah. Maintaining effects damage. Priming costs can only be paid during your main phase when the stack is empty.
Oh, there we go. Yep. Okay, that makes sense. Yep. Cool. So that's actually really good.
You basically have to treat it as though you're playing another forward. However, you're playing him straight from the deck.
Right. Which, good. That keeps it fair. So yeah, unless there's anything else to directly mention about this, do we want to go over opinions? Because I've already started kind of giving a little bit of my own.
Yeah. I'm down to talk about opinions and do a little speculation.
All right. So opinions. First of all, I think this is awesome. My opinion. I agree with people in chat who said this is better than Warp, and I very much push and stand by the thought that this should have happened before Limit Break.
Really?
Yeah, I said it in chat, and I'm gonna stand by it. I genuinely think this should have happened before Limit Break, because Limit Break is a really interesting mechanic. It fundamentally changed the game, and this would also change a lot about the game. But I think this would have been a better way to dabble in like having extra ways of accessing something, as opposed to an extra hand at all times. I think that if all of these cards, all of the dominants and their equivalent icons are on the same power level as Clive, then this is going to do a really good job of kind of adding to the landscape and ecosystem of the game currently. I think it's going to create a lot of good variety in decks. It's going to make people have to think a lot more about their deck building, and it's going to have to make people think about what they have to be ready for in terms of what can come out of the deck, right? Like, because you're not just looking at what's on the field. Now you're looking at, there's something else looming that's definitely going to happen at some point, but when and what do I want to do about it? And so for every turn you let that card survive, that threat gets a little bit bigger, because then it's like, okay, well, when do they prime if they don't do it immediately after playing the card? So that's something to keep in. It definitely is just going to contribute a lot to a little bit more metagaming, and I think it's going to also just change, just the general function of some decks. It'll definitely add a lot of new decks to the meta, which is super cool. And yeah, I think this is fantastic, and yeah, I wish it had come out before Limit Break. If Limit Break came out after this, I probably still have a lot of the same feelings about it, but I would probably see why they did it a little bit more as maybe an answer to priming if you needed one, because they're both the same. They both have the same play window. So I think it would have made more sense that way. But that is just the opinion of one guy.
Yeah. To hop off your point a little bit, so something I feel like I have to talk about is when we did that stream and when we talked about speculating about Limit Break way before it came out, this is more or less what I was expecting it to. I thought Limit Break would work like priming. Like, this is almost exactly what I thought it would be. And that's why when I saw this article and I saw how it functioned, I'm like, that's so funny, because this is exactly how I imagine Limit Break. Now, do I think this should have come out before Limit Break? I don't know. Like, that's not something I don't want to speculate on too much. Like, I see where you're coming from, because it feels like the mechanics feel somewhat related, where you're basically putting something from a deck onto the field in a interesting window.
Yeah, it feels like it's very obvious to me that I could be wrong about this, but it feels like they came up with an idea like that, like one of these, and said, well, they couldn't agree on how to do it. So like, well, what if we just do both?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah,
I'm not gonna,
perhaps.
I'm not gonna say which this was, but there was a game we were working on at work, and this was like 2 years ago at some point. The game has been scrapped since it didn't launch, but I'm still not gonna talk too much about it. Not gonna give a name, but my company and the company we were partnered with to make it very much could not agree on how like one particular design for the game. So ultimately, there was the compromise was okay. Well, let's field test it, but in 2 locations instead of the typical one. We'll do one field test with one install of the game with one set of settings. We'll do the other install with the other settings and other design factor. And then after 2 weeks, we'll switch them. It turns out both companies were wrong. And that happens. Yeah. But it turns out that it just wasn't going to happen. That's fine. But in this case, I think this was another similar idea where someone was like, "Hey, I have this idea." Someone else goes, "I don't know about that." Well, okay. Well, what if we do it this way? Maybe. And there's a lot of back and forth. They say, "Screw it, let's just do both. See how it goes."
Yeah.
And they just didn't put. They just changed. They made a decision on when each would come out. But I could be completely wrong about that, but I'm speculating based on my own hyperbolic anecdotal experience.
Yeah, but so the other thing I wanted to mention specifically about Limit Break is one of the differences between this and Limit Break is the thing is, if they did this first, they could have stopped printing priming cards, right? Where it's like, hey, it was something that we tried out, it didn't pan out, or it was too powerful, we couldn't balance it, etc., etc. And we're fine. And then after that, it's like, all right, well, we kind of scrapped it, we're moving on to something new. Kind of similar to what like Magic does.
Yeah.
But Limit Break is one of those things that it's kind of a Pandora's box where once it's open, you can't really close it because decks will always run Limit Break. There's no reason not to run a Limit Break, which, as someone who is very positive about Limit Break, I actually really like Limit Break. I love Limit Break. I definitely understand the criticism, and that was my one criticism of it is like, once this exists, like a deck that's running a Limit Break and a deck that's not running a Limit Break, one's immediately at a disadvantage.
Yeah.
Similar to like how Companion was in Magic, where like once Companion cards were out, there was no reason not to run it because the Companion cards were that good.
Yeah. Well, and that's kind of what I'm getting at is like, if they decided that it was too powerful or like it was one of those things that didn't work out the way they wanted it to, they could have just scrapped it. Limit Break is one of those things where they could have seen this and said, okay, this went well, and now we can decide whether we want or need Limit Break at all. And that could have been, that's one of those things that, like, why fundamentally change the game on such a huge level when you could try a smaller step first? But maybe they wanted to do that big change to really see how it would impact the game. And, here we are. I mean, these cycles and all these sets and everything else are all developed way ahead of time. By the time we see them, everybody knows, or at least we know, that that's not, this isn't like they printed the set a week before it got into everyone's hands, and right, like this was months and months in development, months of time to print it, and before they print it, they play test it, and there's layers there, so there's in theory up to 9 months between a card being designed and when it releases, so we don't know what their whole process is. We don't work for Square Enix or Hot Japan. We don't know.
This was a little bit of an aside of like this is us kind of speculating about the design process at Square Enix. But I do feel like I have to put out I do like Limit Break. I do enjoy Limit Break, and I love having this alongside Limit Break. I think priming is, at least on the surface, from seeing only one card for it, really cool. It's very flavorful for 16. I won't get too much into that because I know there's a lot of people that still haven't played it.
Hi.
And it's on PC now. You don't have an excuse.
My empty bank account is the excuse.
Obviously steal for it. I don't know.
I'm not Zidane.
Yeah. Just follow our Ko-fi link in the description. But No, so uh, it's very flavorful. A lot of our chat immediately blew up with theorizing about the other priming cards
Mm-hmm.
and the other dominants that we're going to see, the other icons we're going to see. I pitched that they could even start reaching into the other series or the other games with this a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Because even though other games don't have dominants and icons in flavor, they have something very similar. I think Nick brought up Trance from Final Fantasy VI,
Yep.
which I think would make tons of sense. What's the other one that was coming to mind? Ysael and Shiva from Final Fantasy XIV
Mm-hmm.
is like it's kind of funny because Yoshi P worked on both games, and you can actually kind of see the line from
Yeah.
Ysael and Shiva 216,
Mm-hmm.
where it makes a lot of sense. Like she's almost in a way like the first dominant, and she was put into a game, 10 years before 16 came out. So I think it's a very flavorful system. These characters. Well, yeah, these characters, these cards, in my opinion, are well balanced. I'm a little worried about the Clive personally.
Mm-hmm.
Because someone pitched the idea of you're in mono fire, you turn one, pitch a card for a backup, pitch a card for a backup, discard the other two for Clive, swing with Clive, draw two. Like, that is pretty good. And that's obviously like kind of a dream scenario,
Mm-hmm.
but it's a very realistic dream scenario. Like, just having a Clive in your opening hand in a control deck where you want backups and then being able to draw two is really, really nice.
Yep.
And then also just having the ability, if Clive survives for a turn, the ability to immediately prime him into Ifrit
Mm-hmm.
is very scary. And on top of that, you get to keep the two cards that you just drew because you just tap the two backups. You have 4 cards in hand, and then you have 2 backups and a 10k. You just ping something for 10k, and he's haste, so you also get to swing.
Yeah, there's a
Like,
lot of
there's-
layers and lines here that are really potentially strong. And
Yeah.
I think we let the better players than us test those and figure it all out. But, I
Yeah.
can see what they might come up with.
Yeah, but as a monofire boy myself, as someone who I don't my build's a little outdated, but as someone who really enjoys monofire, like I'm very excited for these because I love that line. I love the line of being able to just like play Clive turn 1, swing, do some shenanigans.
Yeah.
And even just to play Clive or any of the future cards and just have that threat of priming and just be able to hold up that mon and just be like, well, I can do it.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that Ifrit is never technically a dead card, like you could still technically play the Ifrit. It's not like I think a dumb comparison is like rituals from Yu-Gi-Oh! Where
Oh,
if you drew
yeah.
the ritual card with no ritual monster, it was useless. If you drew the ritual monster with no ritual card, it was useless. Both of these cards can be played by themselves, and are worded well enough that they can be played by themselves. Ifrit, I think you could argue might be a little like maybe Ifrit isn't fully there yet, but I mean 7-drop hasty 10k deal something 10k on enter is really good. But having that additional layer of having that Clive that can prime into him, I think makes these cards really powerful and really interesting play space to build around.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you're running,
agree.
yeah, because the other thing to note about this is also eating up 6 slots in your deck. That's a huge part of your deck that you're going to have to dedicate to this.
Mm-hmm.
You're dedicating more than a tenth of your deck to one combo, I guess technically.
Yeah.
Which there's plenty of decks that do that, but this is one that it just makes me happy that Ifrit's not just a dead card. Because if I'm dedicating a tenth of my deck to this tech, I better like get it always.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many ways to search a lot of stuff. I mean, you don't have a generic. I don't think we have a generic fire forward searcher. Do we?
I think we do.
We do. I think
be
we do
wrong.
actually. Yeah, now that you say it, now I'm talking out loud. I'm kind of walking myself through it.
Keep talking. I'm gonna mute myself and look it up.
Yeah. But you could totally get your hands on this card and set yourself up for this. And like the other thing that's nice is that the Ifrit forward, the icon, doesn't always leave, like if you discard it, it's still in the break zone, you can get it back, right? Like you have to worry about misdrag in everything, but to varying degrees, of course.
Yeah.
But this is one of those things that you're gonna have things accessible, and like Ty said, these cards are very useful aside from the other. Like if you run out of one before you run out of the other, you're not afraid to play one or the other. You're just not going to get the full benefit, but you still have value there. And Ifrit having that special is really solid too. I actually would really. This is a dream scenario to get this set up, but like have that Ifrit on field, swing, ping, and special on top of that to just nuke two things from orbit on swing, and then get your damage in and finish them off like that. That would feel awesome. That'd be such a cool feeling. So I'm hyped for that. That's super cool. Yeah, these cards make me so excited. I actually really am looking forward to this. And like Ty said, I'm very curious. I was one of those people going off about what else we could get in the other icons, but I do kind of wish they had done this with primals too. Because like you said, Isael and Shiva, that is something that I thought about. Just I knew about 14, even though I never played 14. I need to. Like I thought about that. I'm like, maybe it's gonna be something like that. It transforms into this. But yeah, I didn't have anything to work with there. So, yeah, because I don't know, right? Like I have no idea. Also, I do have a funny note that I made on my work computer that I need to double check. But I remember thinking of like about a week ago, like, hey, what if priming is this thing? And I will copy paste the text onto the screen when I edit. But I remember thinking that it could have something to do with like flipping a card over or transforming it or something. I don't remember if that was the idea I wrote down, but I was probably pretty wrong. But either way, I want to look it up and double check because I had another idea of what it could be like a week ago, and I want to compare my notes to reality.
Sorry. Okay, so after a little searching, so almost everything searches for a fire or for a fire summon. So Jet can kind of, funnily enough, prime into Ifrit, kind of. When he dies, search for a fire forward of cost 7 or more, put it onto the field.
Oh, that's neat.
But the only card that can search both Ifrit and Clive, though you'd want to search Clive, because you'd rather... Because if I'm correct, you can only prime from the deck. You can't prime from the hand.
Correct.
So the only other searcher is Bosch.
Mm-hmm.
Outside of generic, like, forward searchers.
Yeah, that makes sense. So that's relatively fair, I think.
Yeah. Ultimately, I think the mechanic is powerful, but I still think it's fair. I think it's very well intentionally designed. I feel like every time that we talk about the design principles behind a lot of these decisions, I'm very complimentary, and honestly, they don't really give me much to be critical about sometimes.
Yeah, 100% agree.
This is what happens when you have a design team that has X Magic pros on it and stuff. And I always kind of got the sense from the Final Fantasy team that they actively play the game, because it makes a lot of the design decisions I understand. Like with banned cards, for example, I understand why they would design it that way, and then realize later, like, oh yeah, we messed up, like Dataluma or Gesper.
Yep.
But or Motley or not Stern Leonis. Stern Leonis is another card that, like, in my mind, I'm like, oh yeah, I 100% see why they missed it.
Genuine mistake there. Well, that card shouldn't have been printed in the first place, I think, but that's a whole other discussion. Because there's certain things that they realize they have to design around, and if you have to design around it for too long or in such a huge way, it's kind of the same issue they had with Opera Omnia at one point, where Lightning was too good. And they're like, well, we're not going to nerf her into the ground because people get mad and like drop the game. They dumped all these resources into making this character strong. What do we do? And the only thing they could come up with was specifically design some raids that she was useless in. Like counter design against the character, and then people are like, "Hey, this isn't fun." And it's like, yeah, that's fair. Probably wasn't fun for them to design either.
Yeah. That, oh god. It's funny. Our little Apex chat used to be called the City of Boys because, we talked about Opera Omnia so much.
Yeah.
But god. Sorry. The good old days of Opera Omnia.
Rip.
It's awakening something it's awakening something in me. But
you know what, Ty? Let's just make our own Opera Omnia. Let's just do it.
To our own Opera Omnia with copyrighted character.
Yeah, no, we could do non-copyrighted characters. We'll make it all text-based too while we're at it. No visuals at all. No visual assets.
You know what? Let's just skip the whole. App or design. Let's just make it a card game.
Yeah, we'll base it on we'll base it on a famous RPG series too.
Dragon Quest.
Yeah, sure. We could do Elder Scrolls actually. That might be a good one.
Mm-hmm.
Pick a traditional Western game. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Or even better, Dark Souls.
Yeah.
Forget the Western part.
We do need to break into the vein-like genre of card games. Anyway, so I think to kind of wrap up my thoughts on it. Oh, I want to compare it to other card games really quick.
Yeah.
So priming is somewhat similar to Evolution in Pokemon. Evolution doesn't have a cost in Pokemon. You just have to wait a turn after you play the initial Pokemon. But at the same time, similar to it, it overwrites everything on the old cards. There's some cards that allow it, but 90% of the time, 99% of the time, honestly, the evolved card kind of overwrites the one before it, and sometimes the one before it could even be like slightly better. So this is an interesting way of approaching that, where it's a card that you need to run in your deck. It's something that you have to dedicate deck space to be able to do for hopes of an ultimate payoff. And it does really well in Pokemon. In my opinion, it's very well balanced in Pokemon. I think a lot of my issues with Pokemon design are from basic Pokemon that are too strong.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway.
I like this a little bit more than like Shadow versus Evolve mechanic, where it just adds text and like improves everything. I think it's great that it overlays and becomes a new thing, keeping only some parts of it.
That was going to be the next thing I was going to bring up was Evolution and Shadowverse, because Evolution and Shadowverse is literally the mix between Limit Break and Priming, where in Shadowverse you need the specific card that can evolve, and then it evolves into the thing that's in the extra deck. And I mentioned that like at least 4 or 5 times in our discussion about it.
Yeah,
but
because that's what I originally thought it was going to be, is something like an extra deck.
Yeah.
Or I forget which one I thought it was going to be, but yeah, I remember mentioning it at some point in our discussions too. But go on.
Yeah, but the fact that this has to be more dedicated deck space is interesting to me, because I think that's the main thing that I've been focusing on during a lot of this discussion is the fact that you have to dedicate more deck space to this is, I think, more of a drawback than some people will see. And the fact that you could even have that nightmare scenario of like my turn 1 I have like a dead hand, so I mulligan into 3 Ifrit. Well, that completely shuts off Clive for the rest of the game.
Mm-hmm.
Or at least priming Clive for the rest of the game. And it's something that you're going to have to keep an eye out when you play against people of like, I saw them pitch 2 Ifrits earlier. Are they running a 3rd? Like, do they even have the Clive? Have they seen the Clive? Like, is that something that I have to worry about? It's adding another dimension to the game that I really enjoy, and I'm really excited to see more of.
Yeah, like I said, it changes a lot about the subtle metagame, for sure.
So yeah, and the only other thing I can think of to compare it to is like Sea Summoning in Yu-Gi-Oh, but I feel like that's a bit
of a stretch, but even you're not the only person to say that, so at least somebody else was like, I kind of see it, that's kind of it, but only a little.
Yeah. When you stack 2 cards on top of each other, it's always going to be compared to Yu-Gi-Oh.
Yu-Gi-Oh, pretty much.
Yu-Gi-Oh and evolving like Pokemon, like that's it.
I'll admit I haven't played a lot of other card games that have that kind of mechanic on it. I swear the old Digibattle card game in Digimon had something like this for Digivolving. I could be wrong. I never actually learned the proper rules of that game, though, so that might have been a playground rule as opposed to anything else. I mean, to be fair, the rules of that game were simpler than I thought they were, but they were really bad. So that explains why nobody wanted to learn them. I don't remember. I don't think modern Digimon works that way, though, because it's a whole different game. So I think there's something else to it there. But if you play Digimon, chime in comments, please. Let us know what you think. I swear I'm not interaction farming here. I genuinely want to know because I don't remember most of the rules for Digimon. I need to break open those starter decks that I have and dig in. So I think that's all the games we can really compare it to at the moment. I don't think any Bushiroad games have anything like this. So
nothing I could think of. So I think my final thought on it is, as someone who's played and really liked Final Fantasy 16, I'm really excited for this mechanic flavor-wise, and I'm very excited to see the other dominants. And on its surface, it looks really strong. It looks really good. I think there's some aspects of it that we're not seeing, or like some drawbacks from it that we aren't seeing yet, or that we'll kind of figure out while we play with the cards. Something also worth noting is if a primed Clive, if a Clive Ifrit Clive gets bounced, the Ifrit still gets removed, and then the Clive gets bounced back to hand.
Yep.
So just like similar to Limit Break, it still has that weakness of any amount of removal is enough removal.
Yeah. So I think it's I think E-Man said in one of our chats, like, bounce just keeps getting better. And I was saying the bounce is back in vogue. Like it's kind of true. Like, you know, Leviathans of multiple varieties, that card name just keeps gaining stonks. So that's cool. That's interesting. That's pretty much all I have to say on it.
Yep. Good job, Square Enix team. It looks fun. I'm really excited for it. I'm actually really excited to get the rest of them. Very excited to see what the ice one is.
Yeah, I am extremely excited about this set. It's funny. I'm actually more excited about this than I was about the new 13 stuff.
Yeah.
Like it's such a shakeup and such a new, fresh perspective on some things. I am genuinely excited about this, like to a very high degree, and I really want to see more of this.
Yep. I definitely want to see where it goes from here, because this seems like a very Final Fantasy 16 flavor space. So we'll see. I'm very excited for the future as always. This game gives me a lot to be optimistic about, so I'm excited.
Yeah, for sure. All right, well, here's hoping that we get some more content out before Worlds, and then I'm excited to watch Worlds. But for now, we got to sign off, and we gotta get to responsible adult activities. Yep, like paying our taxes or something, whatever. I'm just gonna hop on Apex.
Watching Dandadan.
I'm gonna play Apex.
I'm gonna watch Dandadan. And maybe play Apex. We'll see.
Okay.
All right. Bye.